This is the Believe in Texans podcast. He is former Houston Texans wide receiver, 6-year NFL veteran, Cecil Shorts III. I'm Patrick Creighton, host of Area 45, Sports Radio 610, your home for the Houston Texans. And Cecil, we're kind of in like the second half of the offseason here, right? So you have like the first half of the offseason, which goes through free agency and the draft leading up to OTAs. Then you have OTAs and minicamp. You guys got to go to work. Then you kind of have this second piece of the offseason, well, for players in between minicamp and the actual start of training camp. For the players, what kind of goes on here? Like as a former player, what was this time for you? What did you guys do? What were you told to do? What were you told not to do? You know, what is this life here for in this little short bubble second off season here for a player?
You know what? This time I think for myself, and I know a lot of other guys did the same thing. They spend time with family, they spend time with friends, and they train their behind off. Like that's the main focus, right? Because once we get back to training camp, you're not gonna see your family for a while. You're not gonna be around your friends for a while. It's kind of all football. So during this time, you gotta try to balance what does it look like for me to continue to train each and every day, what I need, where I'm going to train. Some people train out in Cali. Some people training, wherever their hometown is. It depends what floats your boat. And then at the same time, not battling, but kind of balancing, spending time with your kids and your wife, depending where you are in that stage of life, right? So that's probably the biggest thing going on right now. There will be times where you'll see, I'll never forget, and this is probably something Texan fans don't want to remember, but the name Brock Osweiler. he flew us in 2016. He flew us to Arizona, and we stayed out there for a week, and we trained at Arizona State. Myself, all the receivers and tight ends, and we got to know each other, spend time with each other, work timing. But this is the time of year you'll see guys on every team with their quarterback fly to different places and just train together, get to know each other, build that chemistry, build that bond. Because they know how important it is. I know Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and Calvin really used to do that stuff all the time. So that kind of is what's happening. But at the same time, you got to start locking yourself. The closer you get, you got to kind of start locking in, right? And it's not necessarily training like trying to get bigger, faster, stronger. It's more, okay, I need to work on my route running. I need to work on this pass rush move. I need to continue to work on my conditioning, right? Because normally every team I've been on, you got condition tests when you come back to the job. And it's not crazy hard, but you can tell who's been working and who's been partying. Who's been working and who's not been working. There's always a few guys that can't make it, or they're overweight, or they're throwing up, whatever the case may be. But that's what this time majority of it is about. It's about family, it's about friends, it's about really training, getting ready for tuning up for the season.
It's funny you mentioned Brock Osweiler. Brock Osweiler is the only NFL quarterback I've ever caught a pass from.
Really?
So it was during training camp, and it's a practice in the bubble, and they're working on end zone drills. So they're running, inside the 10.
Okay.
And Brock throws a pass towards the sideline. How all the media is all on the one sideline.
Yeah.
So he throws a pass, overshoots everybody. I reached out and just grabbed it.
Ooh.
And everybody turns around like, did you catch that?
All hands.
And I'm like, yeah, like I didn't think it was that big a deal. It's not like Brock threw the ball like 90 miles an hour.
Yeah.
He was more of a touch type pass. He didn't zip it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like the ball was coming in like super hot. It came right at me. So I caught it. Like, what was I supposed to do? Let it hit me in the face? So I reached out and I caught the ball. People were just stunned that I caught the ball. And one of my buddies, Rich Walker, who now he heads up the NFL Alumni Association, the weight loss plan.
Oh, nice.
And he's doing a great job with that. And he started making all these memes, putting my head on DeAndre Hopkins' body and stuff like that. So it was just funny. He's the only quarterback I ever caught a pass from. I'm 1 for 1.
Cool. That's pretty cool. Memories.
Now, you had mentioned like some guys train in this period here before training camp. Some guys train a lot harder. Some guys, maybe they're partying a little bit more. What do you guys do as players when you have someone that quote unquote needs a code red?
You know what's interesting? So it's not many guys, right? Most guys come to camp and they're in shape. Most guys come to camp and they know, okay, if I want to at least try to make the team, I got to be in the best shape of my life. But there are a few guys that always, on every team I've been on and every training camp, that can't make the conditioning test, that don't pass a conditioning test, that throw up, they're overweight, they're passing out, whatever the case may be, and they got to take the test over and over and over again. And I think it depends on the person, right? There's times where I've seen guys hold them accountable. Man, what are you doing? Get yourself together. But to be honest, in my thought process, it was like it's too late now. Like if you if you if you didn't train up to this point, I don't know what to tell you. Like you didn't take it serious, right? So guys eventually pass the test, but it's just a bad look on their part. So now you're starting the training camp, like you said, the second off season, you're starting on a bad note because now they're really it's training camp going straight into season. So if you're starting off on a bad note saying I'm not going to be in shape, how can they take you serious the rest of the time? So you're kind of starting behind the 8 ball, which sucks for that individual. But we try to hold them accountable, try to be there for them. In some situations, it might be like a defensive lineman, like, hey man, your role is more stop the run. So it's all good if you can't, run 50s in a certain amount of time. I don't know how often you'll be doing that in the game, right? You try to just be there for them, but it says a lot when a guy comes in out of shape, and that's not something you want to start going into the training camp.
Now, Cecil is, because we were talking about the second half of the off season, right? This period of time in between mini camp and training camp. So the first half of the off season, CJ Stroud has kind of been on like the greatest whirlwind tour of all time. All right, he's on every podcast in the known universe. We got to get him on this one. That way he can really just check all the boxes. Right? He has been touring not just the country, but touring the world. He and Micah Parsons for the NFL. They're out throwing out the first pitch of a Japanese baseball game. They're wrestling sumo wrestlers. I mean, there's nothing these two guys didn't do the whole time talking smack on each other, which was a lot of fun. I mean, it was entertaining. It was. I also thought it was great for the NFL. You've got a great young offensive player, great young defensive player, and, names that are, if they're not household names already, are going to be real soon. And that I thought that was a great publicity for the league, that these guys are out and they're having fun and they're doing all this stuff and it's a good time. And my first thought was, man, why don't the other leagues do stuff like this? Mm-hmm. And then the other one is, man, CJ's been doing a lot of publicity and a lot of media. And sometimes, man, he's not afraid to say whatever the hell he wants to say. He's not afraid of it. And we've had this conversation, like, is CJ maybe a little too out there with the media this offseason? And Nick Caserio had joined us on Sports Radio 610 on Friday morning. And one of the things he talked about was CJ Stroud and the fact that CJ's been, very public this offseason, at least the first half of the offseason, right? Like before minicamp. CJ's been very public on all these different shows, saying a lot of brash stuff. And his attitude towards this was, when it's time to come to work, is he going to come to work? And he has no doubt that when it's time to come to work, CJ is ready to go to work. So as long as it doesn't affect what he does on the field, doesn't affect his relationship with his teammates, doesn't impede him getting his work in, he don't care. Now, number one, I feel like there are a lot of GMs who will not take that attitude. They have just like, okay, hold on. You can't say any of this, don't want it. We don't care. Just don't do it. Nick was very more laissez-faire about it. Like, as long as it doesn't impact what you're doing, doesn't impact your play on the field, doesn't harm you in that regard, whatever. You're not saying anything offensive. You're not saying anything polarizing. You're just having fun. No big deal. Is that kind of how guys in a locker room feel about things like that? When you got a teammate who's out there in public and talking a lot and making all these appearances, as long as he comes to work and it doesn't change him as far as what he's doing on the field, how he is with studying film, how he's with all that stuff, is that kind of stuff like, whatever, I don't care what you say. You didn't cuss my mama out. You didn't throw us under the bus. You didn't say something that's got the whole world trying to cancel you, and you show up on Sunday. Is that kind of like where the players are with things like that?
Yeah, yes and no. I think what CJ is doing is fun and lighthearted, right? He's
Yes.
not out there making it about him.
He's not
He's
running for
more,
vice president.
you know what I mean? He's not doing something that is bringing attention to him and him only. He's talking about his teammates. He's talking about, he's going on podcasts with Tank Dell. Like he's doing it in a way that is team friendly. So I totally am fine with it. Like I think guys in the locker room be okay with it. Now if it was more about, him all the time, I think guys get annoyed and start to feel some type of way about it. But CJ seems like he's doing it the right way. What makes me nervous, I was going to be honest with you, Pat, what makes me nervous, some of the stories he tells, some of the trash talking he does, as good as he was last year. I mean, he was fantastic. I mean, amazing. It makes me nervous. He's putting a X on his back. Like he's giving, don't give guys more ammo to come after you or hit you a little bit harder or try a little bit harder and get to you, right? I rather I'm all for the fun and game. So that's perfectly fine. But it's just that makes me nervous. Like, yo, you continue to talk about EJ Speed and the Colts, and now when he blitzes, he's gonna really try to knock your head off. And we need you. Like you can't be out there getting, hurt or whatever the case may be, but that's the type of competitor he is, right? So from a player standpoint, I think it makes the guy want to play harder for him. It makes the guy want to like, all right, he really got my back. When he's telling stories about Titus Howard and Titus gets on Twitter and says, yeah, that was correct. Like, you know what I mean? It makes it fun. It makes it seem like they're all in unison all together. But don't, on the other side of it is like, maybe that's my dad's side. Maybe that's like if I had a GM hat on, right? I'm like, hey, do not get hurt. Do not put yourself out there for somebody trying to take you out. But this is a new age of quarterback. This is a new age of media, right? And I think, like you mentioned, the NFL did a great job putting out their star quarterback, CJ Stroud, last year across the world, across different platforms. Same thing with Michael Parsons. They're doing a great job of getting those younger guys around, getting them in front of the camera. They're having a good time. They're enjoying each other. They're bantering back and forth, even about, CJ mentioned, he plays for Dallas. They're all delusional. Like stuff like that is fun. Like that's fun. So I think as long as it stays that way, I think it'll be great. Just that fan side, that coach side of me is like, yo, maybe don't say no more stories because I don't want you to get hurt.
It's like, hey, listen, don't go up to the bear and poke it, like grab a little stick and poke.
Don't do that.
So CJ went and got a flaming spear and he's like, poke, 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 poke. So yeah,
man,
but it's been a lot of fun. And I don't know that guys, because, EJ was talking some trash about him, and then he will, of course, has to talk trash back. And I imagine this goes on during the game all the time. Like this is, if guys are talking in the media, they're definitely talking on the field. Like I don't think there's guys who are total church church choir people on the field, don't say a word, and then the camera goes on. They're like, oh, let me tell you some ish right here.
Yeah.
So I feel like these guys probably talk junk to each other all the time during the game anyway. So. But it's entertaining. It's entertaining for the fans. For sure. But like you said, from maybe like a coach or a GM point of view, like, can you try to get them to not kill you? I appreciate that.
Just a little bit. Do
you realize that if you go down, we have to play Davis Mills? Please stop. Now, speaking of, hey, stop. Steven Nelson, former cornerback for the Texans. He is a guy who said a lot of really inflammatory things about his general manager last year. And then the GM actually gave him more money to shut him up. And he played really well. Like, Steven Nelson played really well for the Texans last year. Well, Steven Nelson hasn't gotten a new deal yet. He's still a free agent. He had some more inflammatory comments this time about his now former head coach, D'Amico Ryans. And then over the weekend, or maybe this morning, Steven Nelson apparently is retiring. I kind of feel like this is... Now, he had mentioned maybe a week or two ago on his podcast that he had an offer, but he didn't like the money on the offer. And there were some reports that there were teams that checked in on him, but I guess he didn't like any of the offers that they gave him, felt they were all too low. is it possible, and I'm asking you as a former player, is it possible that maybe if you are going to be a free agent and you talk all kinds of trash about your general manager, and then you talk trash about your head coach, that maybe teams don't want to put a whole lot of investment into you?
That's extremely possible. I think if you, at some point in time, Pat, when the antics outweigh your field play, they're gonna not sign you or get rid of you. That's just how it goes, right? When they get tired of the antics, when they get tired of all the off field stuff, and it outweighs the on field, or they don't think the on field is enough to put up with the off the field antics, um, then you'll see a situation where you're not getting the money that you want. You'll see a situation where you aren't getting the deals that you want, or the teams aren't coming around like you want. You can't just say what you want in the media and then expect no repercussions. You can't just talk about your GM, talk about your head coach in two different instances, going off on Instagram and Twitter, and then not expect GMs to talk, head coaches to talk, then other teams to communicate, asking about these things, just to vet and do their due diligence on you and your off season and how things were going. Like that's how it goes. It's a business. So even though he did have a good year and played well for the Texans, and I actually like Steven Nelson as a player, when you look at who they brought in, the CJ Henderson, a Jeff Okudah, you brought back Desmond King, you signed Kamari Lassiter. It's like, okay, these guys, I think I see more in these guys, and there's no antics, rather than going and bringing him back and have to deal with whatever they have to deal with, right? And just imagine if what we see on social media and what he's putting out there, I can't imagine what's going on in the locker room and in person, right? He may be fine as a teammate. I'm not saying that. It's just from a GM standpoint, at some point in time, you run your course. Like that's just what it is. If I can get somebody cheaper, if I can get somebody younger, if I can get somebody that's not going to give me those issues, I'll take that person rather than paying a bunch of money for a 9-year vet getting closer to 30 or is around 30. And that's just how the business goes. So I think he might have, I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of hurt him a little bit. But I think we talked about it off air. I wouldn't be so sure he's permanently done playing for this season.
No, I'm with you on that. I mean, look, Steven Nelson showed you he can play. He's a good player.
He is.
And you can never have enough cornerbacks in the NFL. You can never have enough CBs. So I do think that at some point in time, it's very likely he winds up getting an offer that he winds up taking, and it might be something that comes later in training camp. It might be something that comes during the season where somebody has an injury, they don't like their depth as far as replacing a starter or whatnot. Well, Steven Nelson's a starting caliber player, so can you get him on? Hey, let's talk about having you come in here. Maybe it's something where it's a team that's it's a contending team, a team that has aspirations, and he feels like, hey, you know what, I got a shot to win here. I don't know that Steven Nelson is really retired as much as he's probably ticked off. He hasn't gotten the kind of offer that he wants.
Yeah.
And, cussing out your general manager before the season starts, usually not a good way to endear yourselves to other employers who don't want to. I mean, look, I gave Nick Caserio a ton of credit for that because I feel like 90% of GMs, as soon as you start cussing your GM out and calling him cuss words,
yeah,
they're like, we've had enough. Bye, cut, get out, see you later.
Yeah.
But it was, it was a little later in training camp, and they weren't going to be able to really replace him. And Nick Caserio kind of just bit down on his lip, said, you know what? We can't replace him. We need him. I'm going to give him some extra money, and let's hope that, that this makes him happy, and he plays well, and then wash my hands of him at the end of the season. And he did. He gave him money. I mean, you don't usually see a guy cuss out his GM and then get money.
Yep.
And Nick gave him extra money, and then he played well. And then after the season, he's saying stupid stuff about D'Amico Ryans, and surprise, you don't have the offer you want. This is, like you said, it's not a case of the guy can't play. It's a case of, do I really want to deal with that? And I think right now, teams don't want to deal with that. When if injuries pop up, maybe a team then decides that they're willing to put up with it short term because they need to fill a hole.
Mm-hmm.
But for right now, I think it's unfortunate because, like I said, I think Steven Nelson's a good player. And by all accounts, I don't know that anybody in the Texans media, like anybody who covers the team, I don't know anybody who's ever had like a bad experience with Steven Nelson. I think for the most part, they've all liked Steven. He was good to the media. He would talk. He'd give you a quote. He wasn't, rude or abrasive or anything like that to the media. But you can't treat your GM and your coach like that, and expect that people are going to line up, with a bag, like, take my money. Like, it's not going to work that way. And like I said, I hope that it's something, because he can play. And we've said this before. I know that for an NFL player, your career is finite.
Yeah.
And there's only a very small window that you get to have that career. And I would imagine his agent's probably talking to him about that right about now, saying, you could still play. This is your maximum earnings. Do you want to continue to make money or what? Yeah. So I do think that this is something that will be temporary, and he'll wind up playing again. And look, if he can go out there and play well and just not curse out his general manager and say dumb things about his head coach, he might find himself getting a multi-year deal the following season.
Yeah.
It just, he needs to do one of those like A-Rod personality rehabilitation tours, go on a few TV shows, maybe start dating J-Lo. I don't know, something like that, something that makes people start to like you again. And then sure enough, look, money. And it's amazing. Yeah. Unfortunately, I could never get J-Lo to date me. My wife would also have a problem with that. I mean, who knew? But, I also don't have to do a personality rehabilitation because, everybody knows I'm a jerk and it's not going to change. So I might as well just embrace it and accept it and move on. Cecil, you and I were talking about this a little bit off air. Bob Nightingale, USA Today's been Major League Baseball insider forever. And, Bob, friend of mine, comes on the show a lot. We talk baseball. He's got a column out today talking about how Major League Baseball players are getting death threats from aggrieved gamblers who are upset that, whatever their bet was, they didn't hit. So if a player didn't get enough hits or enough total bases, or they didn't win this game, or, he didn't a home run or something stupid like that, right? These gamblers are actually out there making death threats to these guys to the point where they're starting to question how safe they are because of the number of death threats that just keep coming in. Now, I know that sports wagering was not legal in as many places when you played as it is today, but fantasy football has always been very popular, and there are people who play fantasy football for an awful lot of money. Mm-hmm. And you can do that. Like, people think like DraftKings and FanDuel as sports books. They were fantasy football places where you could play fantasy football for big, big money long before they were sports books that everybody knew them as sports books. Did you ever have issues where people would be like all up on your DMs or, trying to track you down electronically because, hey, I bet on you to score 2 touchdowns today. What the hell happened? You suck. You're this, you're that. Like, did you have wackos out there, threatening your life or sending just wild stuff to you because of wagering or fantasy football?
Fantasy football, yes. Fantasy football, it got crazy for that time period. It was there were death threats that I never thought they were serious, right? Just stupid stuff. Oh, you only got 3 catches today. You didn't do SHI, boom, 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 forget you, boom, boom, boom. You're the worst player ever. All consistently DMs if I had a bad game or didn't do anything in a game. Would even be a bad game. Just say I didn't score or I didn't meet the points that they wanted me to meet or projected to meet, right? They would kill me in the DMs or on Twitter. It got to the point where, especially I think 2012 was kind of my breakout season. So 2013, 2014, it got to the point I'm like, I hate fantasy football. Don't even tweet me or talk to me, or when you meet me, say, oh, you were on my fantasy team. I don't want to talk about fantasy football. I couldn't stand it because of so much backlash you will get from it, because it'll be praise that comes from it, and then it's the backlash that comes from it, and the backlash always hits a little harder than the praise. So it's just like, dog, what are y'all doing? Like I used to get so offended in my younger days, like, yo, you couldn't find nothing else to do. Like, I'm sorry, this wasn't my fault, or hey, I didn't play well. So it was never to the point where I felt like threatened I had to do anything, but there were death threats. There were consistent anytime I didn't do something, or say I could have like 7 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown, but I dropped the pass, and they're like, you messed up my league. I'm like, no, I didn't. Somebody ain't got nothing to do with me. But it's funny is that, so I hated fantasy football for like my career. Never played it, never thought about it, just couldn't stand it. And then when I got done playing a couple years later, I got addicted to it. Like I'm all about fantasy football. I absolutely love it. I'm like in 8 leagues a year. I'm doing all types of stuff. It's just a lot of fun. So I kind of understand where they're coming from, but not from a death threat possibly. I'm like, dang, you couldn't catch whatever, but it's more fun for me than life and death, as according to some of those people the guy was writing about.
Have you trolled any of your friends or people you might know in it with like a fake death threat or something like that? We just like trolled the hell out of them because, hey, I needed 14 points from you. You give me 13 and a half. You're gonna burn. Like,
never troll, but I'll ask different questions. Like, hey, so you playing this week? You know, I heard you on the injury report. Like, you gonna go make it a go this week? Hey, how you and the quarterback doing? Like, how you and Baker Mayfield doing? Or how you and this person doing? Like, so I'll have a little fun like that, and they'll just joke with me. But nothing crazy.
Man, it's wild to me that
the key word is fantasy.
The way that people just lose their mind. Like, if you're losing your mind over wagering like a specific bet or fantasy football, you are clearly spending more than your allocated bankroll. Yes. on this. And maybe the problem isn't what the player did. Maybe the problem is you're an idiot.
Yeah.
And don't bet $1,000 that you don't have on whether a player is going to hit X number of like total points or whatever. If you don't have that $1,000, maybe only bet like 50. Maybe that's a little smarter. You stay within your bankroll. I always like people who lose their minds over stuff are playing in pools that are way too deep for them to be swimming in. And there's a lot of those people. It's kind of crazy. I mean, look, I've never really been anti-wagering. So like people have the freedom of, if you're done, if you want to throw all your money away, that's your business. If you're really good at gambling and you make a little bit of extra money, well, hey, that's just your business. But I always felt like when the idea was broached of sports wagering, and well, the players make so much money nowadays. It's not like, the gamblers could really afford to be bribing guys to throw games, because you just couldn't spend that much money all the time. You'd have to be making so much money wagering that you're telling a guy who makes, $5 million, hey, I'll give you $5 million type of thing, right? But what they didn't account for was, well, what happens if players gamble and they find themselves in these really big holes that they're struggling to get out of, which is kind of what we saw with Jonte Porter in the NBA. Here's a guy who's not making a lot of money, making a couple of mil, which, I mean, look, it's a lot of money, but for the NBA, it's not a lot of money.
Right.
And he's making bad bets. And the next thing you know, he's way over his head in the amount of money that he owes to gamblers. And now he's, throwing games and telling people, hey, I'm going to take myself out of this game early, so bet the under really hard. He's giving people inside info on games so that they can bet and make up the money that he kind of owes them. And now he's busted and he's banned for life and his career is over, and he's going to have that stigma on him forever. And I don't even know what he does at this point. Who wants that guy around their franchise, around any franchise? It doesn't have to be in the States. It could be in Australia. It could be in Europe. It could be anywhere. Who wants that guy? You're not going to trust him. Yeah. So, like this is a young kid whose life is over because, well, he got himself into a bad way with gamblers, and then, did something really stupid to to try to get out of it. And I understand we're probably talking illegal gambling versus legal gambling, but gambling is gambling.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we saw Shohei Ohtani get bilked out of what, $15 million by his interpreter
That was crazy.
for gambling. I don't know
crazy.
how you don't notice $15 million out of your account.
That was crazy, Pat. I don't get that at all. 15 million? I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, I know if $15 is out of my account.
Yes.
15 million.
That's crazy.
You know, but it's a crazy. And I feel like this is kind of something to watch here with sports wagering. Is we're in a society where people have just kind of gotten crazy on social media, and they just say wild things as if there's no repercussions for what these wild things are. And it impacts athletes, because if a bunch of wackos bet on, random player to score 28 total fantasy points or whatnot, and they get 26, they're on there threatening the guy's life, threatening his family, threatening to burn his house with the rally, just all this wild, crazy stuff. What happens if somebody actually does this?
Yeah.
Then what? And it's just it's a little crazy, and I'm not entirely sure what the solution is to that, because I think sports wagering is going to get legal in more places before it becomes scaled back. And I know here in Texas, we've been dying for sports wagering to become legal, so that I don't have to go to freaking Louisiana to be able to place a $10 bet. So, there's pros and cons to it, and I see the revenues that it can generate and all that, but at the same time, when it gets crazy and people's lives are getting threatened, I feel like there's a whole different level. Every sports league has arrangements with every sports book to narc on players if they catch a player doing anything, betting on anything, doesn't matter. They're narking on players. Well, now these leagues, they need to start investing in security and cybersecurity to protect their players from the lunatics who are doing this stuff.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I can only see it getting worse from here. The more, like you said, the more the gambling gets legalized in the more states.
That being said, if somebody asks you, hey, Texans over 9.5 wins, take the over. He is former Houston Texans wide receiver, 6-year NFL veteran, Cecil Shorts III. I am Patrick Creighton, host of Area 45 on your flagship home for the Houston Texans, SportsRadio 610. This will conclude on this particular episode of the Believe in Texans podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast everywhere that you get your podcasts, and we'll be back later in the week with another fun episode where we will talk about, I don't know, but it'll involve the Texans and probably something crazy. Until then, have a great week and go Texans. All right, we're stuck here. It's not ending.
Uh-oh.
Come on. What is going on here? All right, so let me see what the hell's going on here, because it's stuck. All right. It's trying to make me log in.
Yes, sir. Hello. Uh-oh.
Hey, Cecil.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, it won't let me end the recording. It's trying to make me log in again, and when I log in, it kicks me out of the screen. So I have no idea if this thing saved.
Oh, okay.
I gotta call Lindsay and find out what's going on because it won't allow me to do anything.
Okay. That's weird. That's really weird.
So I will text you later and let you know what happened.
All right. Appreciate it, boss.
All right, bye.
All right, bye. That's weird.